Next, I would like to invite Dr. Manupreet Kaur ma'am, reader at Department of Prosthodontics. Ma'am is pursuing fellowship in implant dentistry from American Academy of Implant Dentistry, USA. Ma'am has been appreciated with many prizes and awards at various distinguished places. I request ma'am to enlighten us on the topic descriptive epidemiology. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shweta, for the introduction. A very warm good morning to respected Dean ma'am, to all the faculty members, and to all my dear postgraduates. Today, the topic of presentation is descriptive epidemiology. So, the word epidemiology, we have broken, if we'll break this word, EP means upon or befall, demo means something that is related to people or population, and logos means the study of. So together, it is the study of anything that happens with people, that which befalls upon a man. So a definition of epidemiology, according to a dictionary of epidemiology, says that the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related states in specified population, and the application of this study control of health problems. That means in a certain population, we have to see that how a disease is being distributed, what are the determinants that has caused the disease, and by studying that, how we can control the health problems. So in the first place, why to conduct studies? So we conduct studies to describe burden of disease or prevalence of risk factors, health behaviors, or other characteristics of a population that influences risk of disease in a population. To determine causes or risk factors for that illness and to determine relative effectiveness of interventions. These are the primary reasons why we take up any sort of study. Now, if we'll concentrate particularly on epidemiological studies, the epidemiological studies, as mentioned by Nagratna ma'am, as well as Pramod sir in their presentation, that epidemiological studies, when we compare, it is descriptive and analytical. Now, under descriptive comes the case report, case series, incidents, cross-sectional studies, and ecological studies. And analytical studies are further divided into experimental studies, which has been taken up by respected Pramod sir, and observational studies. Now we'll discuss in detail about the descriptive research or descriptive epidemiological studies. Now this study is a study in which only one group, that is the subjects having the outcome, are being studied without any comparison. That means in descriptive epidemiology, we don't compare one group with the other group. Okay? For describing the outcome of health-related phenomena according to its frequency or such other summary figures, and its distribution according to selected variables related to person, place, and time. So descriptive epidemiology is something that we study in a population, in a particular person, place, and time. Now, what is the difference? To understand descriptive epidemiology better, we have to know the difference between the descriptive and analytical epidemiology. What is the difference? In descriptive epidemiology is used when a little is known about the disease. That means we don't have anything to compare with that disease. Whereas in analytical epidemiology is used when insight about various aspects of disease is available and there are variables amongst which comparison can be done. Descriptive epidemiology rely on pre-existing data, whereas analytical epidemiology rely on development of new data. In descriptive epidemiology, we concentrate on who, where, and when. That is, person, place, and time. Whereas in analytical epidemiology, when we are comparing with another group, we ask the question of why. In descriptive epidemiology, illustrates potential associations of that particular disease in a certain population or a certain person. Whereas analytical epidemiology evaluates the causality of that associations. In descriptive, only one group is studied, whereas in analytical, as we are comparing different groups, so at least two groups has to be studied. In descriptive, at the start, we don't have any hypothesis, whereas at the end of the study, we might get a possible hypothesis. Whereas in analytical, at the start, definitive hypothesis is there, and we evaluate the causality of the association. And with this difference, we know that both these studies are important. Now, when we concentrate on descriptive epidemiology only, this type of epidemiological studies are of 5 types. That is case reports, case series, cross-sectional studies, incidences, and ecological studies. Case reports and case series. Case reports and case series are based on reports of a single or else a series of cases treated, untreated, without any specific comparison group, describing the signs, symptoms, pathophysiological parameters in the series of patients, and they do not indicate risk. For example, if we write any case report, okay, we mention all the signs and symptoms, what is the pathophysiology of that particular case, parameters in the series of patients, if we are mentioning the case series. So here we are not comparing our case report or case series with any other group. So it is a type of descriptive epidemiological study. What are the advantages of this? The advantages of this are we can aggregate cases from disparate sources to generate hypotheses and describe new syndrome. Okay. Limitations are that we cannot test for statistical association because there is no relevant comparison group. For this, in descriptive epidemiology, there is no statistics which is involved because we are not comparing between the two groups. And based on individual exposure only, there is only an individual exposure that we are coming or formulating a potential hypothesis at the end of the study. The other type of descriptive epidemiological study is a cross-sectional study. Cross-sectional study is also called as prevalence studies, measures disease and exposure simultaneously in a well-defined population. Okay. How much, if we have taken a certain population, we have to measure that how much disease the people who are already affected by the disease and how much people will get exposed to the disease. That is the present state of the disease is that how many people have already affected by the disease. The advantage of these cross-sectional studies are they cut across the general population, not simply those seeking medical care. So good for identifying prevalence of common outcomes such as arthritis, blood pressure, or allergies, and in nowadays COVID. That how much is COVID prevalent in a particular place. Limitations of this cross-sectional studies is it cannot determine whether exposure preceded the disease. Secondly, it considers prevalent rather than incident cases. That what is the potential of any incidents occurring in that population. It does not give us that output. Results will be influenced only by the survival factors. Cross-sectional studies can be used as a type of analytical studies or testing hypothesis when current values of exposure variables are unalterable over time. Represents value present at initiation of disease. That when the COVID has started, how much was the exposure rate? How many people were affected by it? Okay, and if risk factors is subject to alteration by disease, only hypothesis formulation can be done. Now, when we are doing any descriptive study, there are three key questions that needs to be asked. Why now, why here, and why in this group? That is PPT, person, place, and time. Study of the occurrence and distribution of the disease is based upon these three terms. What are the three categories of descriptive epidemiologic clues? That is person, who is getting sick, where the sickness is occurring, and when it is occurring. So in time, when we study descriptive epidemiology and consider time as a factor, there are 4 ways in which we can study. It can be secular, it can be periodic, it can be seasonal, or epidemic. Secular, these are long-term trend of a disease occurrence, that the disease has occurred from a long duration of a time. For example, tetanus in USA from 1955 to 2000. So it's a secular trend that has happened, that tetanus has happened for such a long duration of time. So during 2000, a total of 35 cases of tetanus were reported. So the percentage of cases among persons aged 25 to 59 years has increased in the last decade. Okay. Possible reasons for changes in trends, that why from secular trend it can be a periodic trend. What are the reasons behind that? So it can be artifactual, errors in numerator due to changes in the recognition of the disease, changes in the rules and procedures for which the study was initially taken up, and in between, because of certain reasons that the rules and procedures might have changed. Classification of causes of the disease, changes in the classification code of causes of death, changes in accuracy of reporting age at death, and error in denominator due to error in the enumeration of the population. These are the factors why the time period of certain disease might change from secular to periodic to epidemic. Or there can be certain real reasons. The real reasons for changes in the trends are changes in age distribution in the population, changes in the survivorship, changes in incidence of disease resulting from genetic factors or environmental factors. The second type of trend when we consider time is periodic trend. Now, periodic trend is a temporal interruption of the general trend of secular variation. That for a long period of time, the disease has been there, but there has been an interval between either the prevalence or the incidence of the disease. Okay, so if such trend exists or has been observed, we term it as a periodic trend. For example, whooping cough. There has been a 4-monthly admissions has been there. Now whooping cough has been prevalent throughout from 1954 to 1973. But there has been certain times where there has been a breakage in the occurrence or the prevalence of the disease. So such kind of trend, we term it as periodic trends. Third one is seasonal trend. A cyclic variation in disease frequency by time of year and season. So seasonal fluctuations can be because of environmental, occupational, and recreational. For example, during winters, there are more incidences of cold. It increases. So we term it as a seasonal trend. Example of a seasonal trend is a pneumonia or influenza that is from 1934 to 1980. It has been observed that in a particular time of the year or during a particular season, the incidences of pneumonia and influenza death has been increased. And the fourth type of trend is epidemic trend. What is epidemic trend? It is an increase in incidence above the expected in a defined geographic area within a defined time period. Now, this epidemic trend can be of three types. That is endemic. When we call it as endemic, when the habitual presence of the disease within a given geographic area, that it usually occurs in a particular area. A disease usually occurs in a particular area. We name it as endemic. When that endemic can be called as epidemic, when the occurrence of an infectious disease clearly in excess of normal expectancy and generated from a common or propagated source, we name it as epidemic. Then pandemic, a worldwide epidemic affecting an exceptionally high proportion of a global population. For example, the best example that can be given in today's time is of COVID. So when it was only at the particular place from where it has started, it was an epidemic because it was only confined to a particular area. Then when it has spread worldwide, it has taken a state of pandemic. That was about the trends. Then time clustering, time place cluster or a disease clusters. What are these clusters? Clusters are a group of cases occur close together and have a well-aligned distribution patterns in terms of time and place. For example, in today's time, when we say that there has been a certain clusters of COVID that are found in certain places where the incidences of COVID is more. So we say that they are the clusters, they are the potential disease spreaders. So cluster analysis used for rare or special disease events. The next factor is place. Now, many diseases have typical spatial relationships. For example, goiter happening more at the foothill regions, anthrax and brucellosis happening more in the rural places. That means a place is having a certain sort of diseases because of various factors. Coronary heart diseases in an affluent or a developing country or already developed countries. Difference in the distribution of a disease, that is first is based upon the political boundaries, that is international comparison, regional comparisons within country itself. That is, if we'll compare the state of a certain disease in one state of our country to the other state, okay, that is a political boundaries. Natural boundaries, that is rural or urban differences, altitude or local distribution of the disease. International comparisons. Now, Japan has for example, Japan has a very low coronary heart disease mortality rates, but high rates of cerebrovascular accidents, hypertension, and gastric carcinoma. Similarly, UK has high lung carcinoma rates, while US has high coronary heart disease rates. That means a certain type of disease is more having its impact more in a certain region. That is called, and then in international comparison comes the migrant studies as well, is a good method of dissecting this factor. Distribution according to place, that is, one is international comparison and second is regional variations within the country itself. Another sort of difference is of the rural and urban difference. It's point out towards possible environmental factors. Like ischemic heart disease, sexually transmitted disease, hypertension, etc. are more common in urban areas, whereas orophycal infections are more common in rural areas. International, regional, and then comes the local distribution. The finding may finally be due to one or two reasons. That is, the inhabitants of that place or some etiologic factors. If we are taking up any studies, for example, we have to see that if we are taking in a particular population, only in a particular place, for example, we are taking it Rajnandgaon, we will be studying the local distribution of a particular disease. For being a regional distribution, we have to compare it with the prevalence of disease in some other city. And if we want to go for an international distribution, we have to compare the prevalence of the disease across the borders of the country. So, some etiologic factors and characteristics in the place are present. If this is the reason, then high rates of disease will be observed in all ethnic groups in that area. High rates are not observed in persons of similar ethnic groups living in other areas. Even the local distribution will have so many variations. Healthy persons entering that area become ill with a frequency similar to an indigenous inhabitants. Inhabitants who have left that area do not show high rates, and some evidences of the disease may also be found in animals in the same area. Now, there are certain ways by which we can depict this distribution according to place. One of the methods is spot mapping. Spot mapping is the simplest yet a very productive method of displaying the place related to the distribution of the disease. Another method is map on map. That is, we combine two maps to bring disease frequency plotted as colored dots into visual approximation with other variables like roads, rivers, indices of poverty, etc. And this technique may also be used for studying movement of a disease in both time and place. Now, this is an example of a spot map of deaths from cholera in Golden Square area in London in 1954 that points out a prevalence of a disease in a certain area. Now, this pump has later suspected and proved to be a source of infection. So that we can actually depict by a spot map. The third key factor in any descriptive epidemiological study is a person. Now, when we are choosing this third factor, it can be based on different variables. It can be based upon the person's age, sex, occupation, what is the immunization status of a person, any underlying disease that a person is suffering, medication, nutritional status, socioeconomic factors, crowding, hobbies, pets, travels, and so on. There are so many variables by which we can choose a person to take part in our descriptive epidemiological conducting this study. That is going to define which variable we have to choose. So there are longitudinal studies versus gives us the prevalence of the disease. That is that state of the disease which is already there. Whereas the longitudinal studies gives us the incidence that this disease will happen in so and so individuals. The incidence rate will be this much. That we can know it by longitudinal study. For example, if we will conduct any cross-sectional study, we will know that how much of a COVID-19 patients exist are prevalent in this day. But we'll not know that how much will get infected. Whereas if we'll conduct any longitudinal study, we will get to know that what will be the incidence of new cases of COVID-19. Cross-sectional study consume less time and they are easy because we have to study only the current scenario. We don't have to take the study forward from today's day onwards into the future. Whereas the longitudinal study should be preferred when possible but often is difficult. The other type of descriptive epidemiology is incidence. Now, what is the difference between a prevalence and an incidence? A prevalence is the number of existing cases of a disease in the population during a defined period. Now, incidence is the number of new cases of disease that developed in the population during a defined period. Incidence rate is a measure of a probability of the event among persons at risk. Now, incidence rate is population denominator. That is, what is incidence rate? It is new cases during that time period, that is X, upon the specified population at risk. For example, if we'll take that there is a specific population that in today's time, if we have to calculate the incidence rate in a given population for COVID-19. So what we are going to do is we will analyze the population in a particular area in a given time period, and we'll analyze first that who are the persons who are at risk. Okay, the people who are at risk not necessarily will develop, all the people who are at risk will not necessarily develop the COVID-19. And then we have to analyze that how many of them we have developed actually COVID-19. By that, we can actually take out the incidence rates. The last type of descriptive epidemiological study is ecological studies. Ecological studies are also known as correlational studies. It uses measures that represents characteristics of entire population. It describes outcome in relation to age, time, utilization of services or exposures. The advantages of any ecological studies are we can generate hypotheses for case control studies and environmental studies. And we can target high-risk population, time periods, or geographic regions for future studies. But correlational studies has certain limitations that because of the data are for groups, we cannot link the disease or exposure in individuals. We cannot control for potential co-founders, and data represents average exposures rather than individual exposures. So whenever we are doing any ecological studies, an individual is not targeted. A group is targeted, whereas the individual outcome cannot be known. So we cannot determine a dose-response relationship. Caution must be taken to avoid drawing inappropriate conclusion or ecological fallacy. Now, this is a pattern of disease occurrence correlation of population statistics. So it is used as first step in determining association, that is how much is the disease burden versus prevalence of risk factors. For example, smoking versus of lung cancer. So that is a sort of correlation study. Now, what are the objectives of this descriptive epidemiological studies? The objective is to evaluate trends in health and disease and allow comparisons among countries and subgroups within countries, to provide a basis for planning, provision, and evaluation of services, and to identify problems to be studied by analytic methods and to test hypotheses related to those problems. So these are the objectives of descriptive epidemiology. Now the question arises that if we have to take a certain study, if as a postgraduate you have to take up a descriptive epidemiological study, how are you going to conduct it and where does it fall in all the steps of doing the research? So the 10 steps of outbreak investigation, we have to prepare for fieldwork, establish the existence of an outbreak, that there is a certain disease that exists, verify the diagnosis, define and identify the cases, right? Once we have done all these 4 things, we have answered these 4 questions, we will perform a descriptive epidemiological study. Okay, and we know that at the end of the descriptive epidemiological study, we might form a hypothesis. Once we have got the hypothesis, we can move on and perform the analytical epidemiological studies, taking our research even further. Okay, then after the analytical epidemiology, we can refine hypothesis and conduct additional studies, implement control and prevention measures, and communicate the findings at the end. Okay. So this was all about descriptive epidemiology. It is a good way to start a research work to know and to take the study further. These are the references that has been referred to for the preparation of this presentation. Thank you all for your patient listening. Thank you.
As we are lagging behind time, we would continue with our session. Moving further, I would like to invite Dr. Rusha Kashyap ma'am, reader at Department of Prosthodontics, to present on the topic funding and research. Ma'am has many publications to her credit. Over to you, ma'am.
मनोप्रीत मैम को सर्टिफिकेट नहीं दिया.
Ma'am, you are not audible. Kindly unmute.
Okay, let me start again. Very good afternoon.